No, why would you do that at the end? No. Cancel. Fine day. Blessed be to your day. As we start getting ready for today, I'll throw that up in there. I'll throw that. Why don't you do what I want you to do? Oh, shit. Invite people. Okay. Divine day, blessed be to your day. May be everything you require to create everything that you desire. If you don't know me, I'm Papa Lucifer Samdi, co-therapist, shadow shaman, spiritual life coach. And today I wanted to get into a subject like everything else that we always want to get into. Today I want to get into a subject that's something that we really don't think about, and the aspects of if you're living based on survival, living through your traumas, living based on survival, living based on those older narratives of self. I asked myself a question a couple of weeks ago, and I sat with it. Like I usually sit with a lot of my questions with myself. That's the most important part, sitting with your questions. And the question that I asked myself and I got the answer to was, are you grooming or are you raising, shifting, learning? Are you grooming? I just sent out a couple of invites. Don't feel bad if I didn't send you an invite. Just sending a couple of invites out. All right, going over here as I'm setting myself up, getting ourselves ready. Are you... Y'all know I'm very big on, if you don't know, Papa Lucifer Samdi, your coach, therapist, shadow shaman, spiritual life coach. Here to make that shit normal. But if you are familiar with last year around this time, I got deep into the aspects of understanding your do this here. Boom. I got deep into the aspects of really understanding. Yeah, everybody's here. If y'all see me looking over to the side, it's because I got my laptop open. I'm looking at my laptop to read questions. When we go through as we're going through the shadow work process, as we're going through the learning process, as we're going through our healing process, one of the biggest things that I always say is shadow work, your healing is not a one and done. That means you're not going to be sitting in it and you're going to get to it. You get to points in your healing. You get the points in your healing. You get the points in your journey. You get the points inside of your learning of yourself to where a lot of times when we're looking at things based on understanding and we understand, like I'm going to break down the aspects of understanding, skill, experience, and how we validate things. That's all a part of that grooming narrative. It's that grooming. That means I'm only gathering enough information based on a certain target result or that target of an identity to suppress an aspect of myself and not really dealing with an aspect of myself. A lot of times when we think about grooming, you look outside, you look on the news, you hear about child trafficking, black women being snatched up, kids being snatched up. But the thing about everything that I'm always going into, and we have to put that, really sit and look at, it's like if you walk into a room, I've said this before, if you walk into a room We walk into a room, we walk into a space, and everybody's there at the bar. Everybody's there at the bar. Everybody at that bar is there for a different reason. The man over there sitting over on the corner, the man sitting on the corner of the bar, he's there because he's out there scoping out people. He's out there scoping out chicks and trying to lay something out that night. The guy that's sitting over there on the other side of the bar, he has had a long day at work and he really don't want to go home. Everybody going into that space is going to be affected differently by whatever's inside of that space based on consumption. That's when we're getting into the aspects of this grooming narrative, this unconscious aspect of how we're grooming, how we stay in this state of trying to groom ourselves to stay inside of a certain pattern. Matter of fact, while I'm sitting over here doing this, sending out these invitations. Let me send out some more invites real quick. While we waiting on it. Oh, I don't want that. While we waiting on it to get the works. But yeah, a lot of times we sit inside of these spaces and we don't realize that in order for something to happen, in order for something to take effect, in order for something to happen, in order for something to take effect, it must already be present. It must already be present. Something must be present with inside of myself already in order for that to take shape, form in my life. Just being honest with it. In order for something to take shape in my life, to take form in my life, to come into my life, for me to react in my life, it must be something that's already a part of myself. It's already here. Yeah, exactly. It's already here. It's a part of my life already. I've already been doing it. I've already been acting out in some way, shape, or form, or feeding that in some way, shape, or form. When we go into the aspects of, when we're talking about this real aspect of grooming, the targeting, the best way that I can bring it all together to let you understand how it makes sense. If you looked at the post before that, and we're going to get into each one of the lines. Are you courting? Are you dating? Or are you in that state of you trying to validate something about yourself? See, the aspect of the healing process, when I always talk about marrying yourself. As I let y'all know, I've been married to myself ever since August 21st, 2021. And everything that's came after that has been in the aspects of teaching me to go further. But that's going through a certain process. There's a difference between you gathering information in that space to validate yourself or to this unconscious predisposition of whatever target you're trying to reach. And when we talk about the target, we're talking about, in this case, we're going to talk about the identity. That identity you're trying to maintain. And we use simple examples, you're an independent woman, you're a bad bitch, you're a real nigga, you're a real one, you cut from a different cloth. You cut from a different cloth. You sitting there with yourself in the space. I'm cut from a different cloth. Or what's another thing that a lot of times we like to use? I'm the last of a dying breed. A lot of the things that we say that are based upon grooming, I'm grown. You'll understand where I'm grown. People are sick. A lot of these aspects are grooming tact. These are parts of the grooming process. When we think about how you were raised, when we think about, okay, cool, I was raised based on survival. You were groomed. That's why when your grandmother was like, oh my God, you're going to be the first one to go to college. It's grooming. It's emotional feeling. They're connecting to it based on that experience, not really understanding it. But so when you actually come into your aspects of your healing work, you start dealing with yourself. You start facing these aspects of yourself. You start when you're really working on this internal dialogue, you're stepping out of the grooming. You're stepping out of the groove. You're stepping out of that grooming narrative. You're stepping out of where everybody is still groomed, where everybody is still stuck on certain aspects and certain catalysts to fill that emotional void. You're no longer sitting in that space. This is when we get into the aspects of raising. This is when we get into the aspects of growing. This is when we get into the aspects of learning. It's very direct. When we're going into the aspects of grooming, it's the extremes. And as I've broken down the extremes before, it's always the extremes. It's the extreme good or the extreme bad. It's the punishment or the reward. When we get stuck in the target aspect, when we're targeting people, a lot of times we come into this targeting space with ourselves, and it's based on gathering and validating information, validating and gathering enough information to set the tone for punishment and reward. How many times have you sat inside of a space, like, not, if you're really not having a conversation with yourself, or the conversation, even a conversation you have with yourself unconsciously, and we really don't think about how unconscious that conversation is. Like, think about a conversation with yourself. You're sitting there, you're having a conversation with somebody that you're getting to know, you're getting to understand, getting to know. And the first things that come into your mind are those dialogues that you keep using. This is too good to be true. This is too good to be true. This person is hitting on all of these cues. This person's running game. And even into the aspects of how you respond to that person. You looking at Shorty, you like, damn, you must got all the dudes looking at you because you haven't learned. And we don't think how unconscious that is. Or, damn, you must got all the girls look. You must got all, you got a bunch of chicks in your inbox. We don't really understand that those are grooming techniques to gain reaction. Grooming is based on gaining reaction of punishment and reward. So if they answer that in a way no matter how they answer it, your mind is automatically listening to certain cues to give them the reward. Like, oh, okay. Now you're giving them the reward. But also inside of that space, based on this understanding, you haven't developed enough skills in the aspects of dating yourself, of getting to know yourself. This is where we get into understanding, experience, and skill. It's very, very easy for you to say, use an example. It's very, very easy for you to say and sit there and be like, yeah, I done been through the first, like we see it all the time in the light workers and certain workers inside of their space. You haven't made it to a certain point with yourself. But now you inside of that space and you're like, yeah, based on my experiences, I have an understanding. Based on that aspect, you're sitting in that space with yourself. You haven't gathered enough information to acquire that, to use that skill. To be able to, you haven't made that a skill yet. Yeah, you have been through, you've done things and it's worked or it hasn't worked and you gathered results, but you're always stuck in the aspect of experience. You haven't experienced, so your understanding is limited based on the trauma. So if I go through a traumatic event, using an example, if I went through a traumatic event when I was younger, if I go through a traumatic event in my earlier aspects of my life, I went through traumatic events. That means I've only gathered data based on the traumatic event, my reactions, the emotions inside of that space. So now not sitting inside of that space and not fully understanding that space, all I can do is react based on that space. So every space that I go in, my mindset, the trauma is looking for that target. The trauma is looking to gain that information. Me living in this traumatic loop, I'm looking for certain information. I'm looking for certain words. I'm looking for certain actions. That way I can develop, because I don't want to go through understanding. I'm still stuck in the extremes. I'm stuck on a reward and punishment. So just as simple as, use an example. You can say, oh my God, this guy, this chick does not make me feel insecure anymore. When I'm with them, I'm not insecure. But until you went through the process of really understanding, that means the feedback. Because remember, the relationship, whatever the relationship may be, all it is a feedback center. So if my intentions are not set to learn myself, to love myself, I'm just trying to get through the day and get up and go. So that's the courting process or the targeting process or the gathering that information process. Then naturally, when I'm sitting inside of the space, the dating aspect or I'm networking, gathering this information, it's only to keep that suppressed. It's only to keep that insecurity suppressed. So now everything that I layer on top of this is going to be made the same. The reason that this is so important, everything that you're doing in the physical sense is automatically the masculine. Thirst trapping, every time you see Shorty on Instagram, Facebook, got her ass out, she said, I'm sitting in my sacred energy, my sacred feminine energy. That's the simple acknowledgement of her sitting in that space. That's the masculine point. The picture that you're seeing, the visual, the image is the masculine point. So now when everybody's under her post and if whatever her intention was, if her intention wasn't clear or she hasn't defined that aspect or acquired that skill set yet to be able to do that, that's why you'll get mad and you be upset when, oh my God, 15 niggas under my post talking about they like the way my ass look. What did you think was going to happen? You had look at the picture. Look at the picture. You had your ass out. Look at the picture. You didn't have a shirt on. Look at the picture. Instead of overreacting. See, the thing when it comes to this aspect of grooming is in the aspect of passively giving, the punishment is passive. The punishment is passive. The reward the reward becomes active. So you're actively seeking a reward. And then the punishment becomes a passive act in that intention. So now, old buddy done jumped in your inbox, said, Queen, you looking da-da-da-da, saying all these lines, or Shorty jump in your inbox saying all these things. And now you, instead of making it a teaching moment, because we don't know better, having it as a teaching moment, because we're not at that aspect with ourselves, guess what we start doing? We automatically gonna react because now we're sitting in passively. The punishment is passive. We're not learning the punishment, i.e. the consequence. See, we keep our consequences we are passive to the consequences. We're passive to the punishment because it matches that trauma. It validates that trauma. This is how you just keep saying, you keep validating the same trauma. Because in your mind, because now we go back and listen to a script in your head where your mom kept telling you that your uncle was sick. Don't wear them shorts around your uncle. Your uncle was sick. Don't wear them shorts around you. Don't dress like that in front of your uncles because one of your uncles is sick. You know, he be drinking real bad. So now it's validating that. It's a validation of that point, of that traumatic point. So now in this current state, you have to keep making that real. In this current state, you have to keep that projection real. You have to target even when you're doing it unconsciously, you are targeting a certain environment. You're targeting for a certain image. You're targeting. So you gather just enough information to remain inside of that target. And then you come into that state with yourself in this grooming process. This is when we drop down into the aspects of isolation. Now you're sitting in a state of isolation. You're isolated in duality. I want you to think about that. You're isolated in duality. You're isolated. The only things inside of that space is now your aspects of your shadow. This when we get into those space. Let me go over here real quick. Everybody that's hitting in that space is an unhealed aspect. Because in reality, I'll use an example. Every time an E5 nigga hit in my inbox or an E5 priest want to hit in my inbox, I used to react that way. But I had to really sit with it and was like, he's targeting a certain person. Let me look at the words that are being spoken. If you ever had an E5 hit you inside of your inbox, they always say they got a message from the ancestors. It's usually always got a message from the ancestors. Talking about the aspects that you got some something on you. So that's targeting. They got something on you. Yeah. I cannot stand you. They got something on you, and then they're followed by asking you, now they're going to fill the emotional void. This is how targeting works. You're seeing the aspects of targeting. They're hitting you at a certain point. They're targeting you based on an emotional rhythm. They're gathering information, then they're there to fill the void. If they get to this point, then usually that's when they're going to be hitting you with like, all I need is your name, and then I can go to get to the oracle, and then this is where I would be like, the whole damn time I'm sitting there like, and I tried to make it real all different and shit, but I was like, nah, I just thought, just like with anybody, I'm sitting there like, nah, I just had a conversation with my grandmother. My grandmother was good. Like, I remember one time an Ephod came into my, he was like, he said a witch put a curse on you back when you was 2 years old. I remember my christening with my grandmother. If I didn't have that information, I would have been susceptible to that aspect inside of that space to relinquish my energy in that space. Just as simple as it becomes. But now you must look at it on both ends of that aspect. Why is this coming into my space? See, a lot of times when we're not going through that grooming process, you're grown, you done acted a certain way, you done been a certain way, you done done something for years. You've been doing it for years, you ain't never known no other way. The first thing you got to accept, I say this shit all the time, you got to accept that you were groomed. You got to accept that your childhood was based on the narrative of grooming. Everything that you heard and in that space and every command that was given to you was the aspects of grooming. The best way that's why, give an example. That's why you'll look at Sigmund Freud or you'll look at any other psychologist of aspects, like the one with the Pavlov, when he does the thing with the ringing of the bell and the dog gets mouth salivates for food and is hungry. And you'll look like that's what you're doing. The aspect you've been groomed in that space. Remember, it already had to be there first. You had to be set into that point. You had to be set into those narratives, and those narratives had to already be set in motion. But a lot of times we'll get stuck because even when you're coming into your healing, you coming into your consciousness, you coming into your awareness. R. Kelly was in jail for grooming. R. Kelly that's what R. Kelly did. Everything that he did was an aspect like you had the only reason that you were triggered by R. Kelly, oh my God, he was doing that to all them little girls. Everybody that got affected by that or felt some type of way about that, I can guarantee even if you don't know, there's that family secret that's still playing inside of your family. There's that secret that you still holding on to. This is how it connects. It must be something there. In order for you to be targeted, something must already be present. You must already be showing it. That's when so when you're thinking about you going into a space, are you looking for, this when we talk about emotional dumping, that emotional dumping aspect, you're used to dumping on people. You're used to emotional dumping. You're used to the mirroring effect. A lot of people, when it comes to the grooming, it's the mirroring effect. That means you were groomed, now you're doing the grooming. You were groomed, now you do the grooming. The best way to understand grooming is when you look at the aspects of understanding the earlier aspects of Nicki Minaj, and if you look at Nicki Minaj's story and the shit that she went through as her child, when you listen to everything that she says, it's in the aspects of grooming. When you listen to, y'all sitting here listening to everybody in that space for that image, everything is based on grooming. That grooming keeps you in a state of being separated. That grooming keeps you in a state of actively looking for the reward. The grooming is that state of you actively looking for the reward and denying the aspects of the consequence. Because you're always going to go back in understanding, I've been through worse. I've been through this. I've been through that. So now you validate what you've been through by ignoring the consequences, by not taking accountability, by you keep doing the same thing over and over and over again. When we get stuck in the aspects of this trauma, when we get stuck in the aspects of understanding the trauma, everyone, if you're living in a state of that trauma response, your trauma response goes right along with grooming. You're now stuck because now you're going to groom. I'm independent. I'm independent. I'm independent. What was, when I'm talking to my clients, like, what was your childhood like? We're getting into the aspects of their childhood. We're getting into the aspects of, you can go straight to an aspect of, why do you keep feeling that you need to be every man's savior, every woman's savior in that aspect? And you can think, most people, and this is the thing, due to understanding on that surface level, you'd be like, shorty got, father wounds, or shorty got mom wounds, or whatever. But you're not understanding. You got to go deeper in that aspect, because yes, she can have mother wounds, but was her mother, the way that she presented herself, was she sitting in her femininity? That means the emotional receptive, being emotionally over emotional, feeding based on emotion and targeting certain emotions, targeting through jealousy, inadequacy, and things of that nature? Or was she sitting in her masculinity? That means she was always saying, you got to go get to the bag, or giving you didn't had 19 fucking birthdays. You didn't get your daughter's son 19 fucking birthdays when you was out there on the pole, and then your body ain't right no more. So now the birthdays ain't the same, and you can't, now you feel ashamed. You didn't feel ashamed at that point. When I talk about emotion, that shame wasn't from that point. That shame that led you to that pole in that space to express yourself, to do what you had to do. That's where that's coming from. That's what you haven't forgiven yourself for that aspect. You haven't dealt with that. So you just allowed that to keep grooming the same space. So now inside of your space, you're going to have a target. Now you become the groomer. That's like if you sat there and like, I've sat and heard conversations. If you sit there inside of a space and you tell your daughter in front of your man, and you're like, yeah, men aren't that smart. These women out here are hoes. I remember the first time ever hearing that, and I was like, yo, whoa. Tell her what it really is. What you mean? Yeah, women are hoes. These bitches out here scandalous, they hoes. Tell her what it really is. And I remember I sat there and I had that, there was a teaching moment for me inside of that space while I was in that relationship. Like, nah, you have to understand, like, when it comes to women that have not had a certain amount of attention from home, they didn't have that father figure, certain narrative, certain aspects inside that space, and I explain it. See, a lot of times that grooming narrative is a lot easier. It's easier to categorize and further polarize right and wrong, polarize good and bad. It's very easy to polarize it rather than actually being able to, because you only have understanding based to a certain point. Whether it's you don't want to really talk about yourself and how you match that, that's why you're triggered by it, because you upset because old buddy got your man attention, old girl got your man attention, and so now she's a hoe. But you did the same, you did the same exact things, just in a different set of cadences. You play that, that's why you're being triggered. Because both of y'all have this, you're in the underlying of those same issues. That's the extreme punishment or the reward. If I would to agree, it would have been an extreme reward inside of the space. Yeah, I agreed. But since I didn't agree, that natural aspect of the consequence or the punishment. See, we be thinking about punishment going to be automatically bad. But the punishment. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That is one of the biggest, unfortunately, yeah, that's one of the biggest aspects of grooming. It's grooming because if you don't remember certain aspects, but like the birthday and all of the memories for the birthday, as it's not a negative sense, but a lot of these aspects were based upon the grooming. It was the intention behind it. See, a lot of times we don't look at the intentions behind things. Like if I sat here and I was like, oh my God, like I can use an example. Being like, if I want to watch the old home videos of my life, I have access to them. Me watching the old videos of my life, the way that I was inside of the videos, like how I was, how I spoke, how I held myself, I was always trying to direct things in that nature. I wouldn't be able to see that because behind that, constantly seeing that image of it being good, 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 it would keep me blocking away from the image of it being bad because I'm still feeding from that point of being groomed. I'm still feeding from a certain point. I'm still feeding from a certain narrative. Because before that, the memories that come up, this is kind of like when I take you through hypnotherapy, we go through visualization. Now, the memories that come up around Christmas, the memories that come up around my birthday, the memories that come up around that, all you remember is that. This is what makes it so hard when you're actually getting into the shadow because that's all you remember. You remember it was a good time. You remember the times at your grandmother's house. You remember the times with your cousins. You remember certain times. But also, now on the other end of that, there's somebody that doesn't remember it that way. They remember the time with their cousins. And they remember the other times with their cousins. They remember the other times. But if you're always put into a space where we always had this, and this, but you never saw anything else, you're because it's rooted and it's repressed. There's the repressed states, and then there's the things that have been suppressed. They've been pushed so far down into your memory that those are the original roots. So if something happened in the original roots with yourself, those original roots that led you to a certain point, you'll bury that down under every other memory. And that memory, now at a young age, you learn a lot of times we raising up, like if you raising your brothers and your sisters, or you had to become the man of the house, you're the man of the house now. I had to grow up too early. I had to grow up too soon. That's a trauma response. You're learning. That's your first lessons in being hyper vigilant. We don't think of it as anything else. It's not about as bad or it's the aspect of truly understanding it. I had a very hyper vigilant complex when I was younger. That grooming aspect of that unconscious grooming was, I had a very hyper vigilant complex when I was younger. But that hyper vigilant complex, it allowed me to, the way that I paid for school, going to school, the way that I worked at my jobs, the way that I acted out, the way that I was moving inside of my space, the way that I was moving, the way that I was acquiring certain things and acting a certain way, moving in a certain way. All of that shit lined up to that. So all that lined up to that, but it also lined up to all of the negative aspects because I had to have now inside of this space, since this is unresolved, I have to have something in my space that represents that, whether in a direct sense, so I can, whether I'm targeted directly to gather the information to create this state of isolation, or I'm indirectly, that means it's going to force me into it's going to force me to look for a state of isolation. This is where we get into avoidance. This is when we get into escapism. This is when we get into avoidance and escapism. If you naturally going into a space and the first things that you say are the things that you do not want or the things that you are not looking for, and then you state the things that you are looking for, which is okay. Yeah, cool. But the moment that you're asked, okay, where are you? The moment that you meet something that's at that point and you're not able to go forward with it, it's because it's triggering your grooming habits. It's triggering your grooming habits. You want to stay inside of that. I'm a good person. Remember, we talked about it last week, the being a good person. I know I'm not a good person. I'm a very discerning person, but I'm not, I'm the ultimate anti-hero. I know that's what I am. Because on one side, I'm no longer in the extremes. See, the thing about staying in that grooming complex, you stay in the extremes. You stay trying to act out the extremes. You stay trying to act out those extremes over and over and over again. So the way that you were raised, you're now either you're going to sit there and do that consciously or you're going to do it unconsciously. That means directly or indirectly, overt or invert. So now naturally inside of your space, if you came from a space that was of lack and it was a pain, you felt it was a pain, you didn't get what you wanted. It could be something as simple as you didn't get that gift that you wanted. You didn't get the gift that you wanted on Christmas. But until you understand the reason why you didn't get that gift on Christmas or why your mom looked at you a certain type of way when you asked about it and felt she looked bad and felt shame in her face, you're going to keep repeating it because you don't know what the information is. I'll go back, look at my shadows. I can go back and I can look at those arguments and those moments, all of those memories on the table and really sitting with them and see how you were groomed in the aspects of that survival mode. Staying within that complex. I need to survive. So now everything, remember we talked about it last week, videos on my YouTube channel. You're now naturally creating, based on the targeting and the grooming complex, punishment, reward, protect. I need a space that validates what I am and what I do. And inside of this space, I need elements that are less emotionally developed than myself or at the same level in order for it to work inside of that space, as opposed to the raising your energy, as opposed to the grooming and the courting process. The courting process is all about intentions. By the time you get to the dating process, by the time you really get to that dating process with yourself, by the time you really get to that dating process with yourself, you're now affirming what your intentions are. You're now affirming I can now affirm what my intentions are. That courting phase, that means I'm setting intentions. That means I have an internal target that I'm reaching and I'm learning about myself. That grooming aspect, it makes it external. That grooming aspect, I don't want this type of nigga. I don't want this type of chick. So now everywhere that you go is going to be gathering enough information for your understanding to validate your why, to invalidate so you can continue living in the punishment and the reward. Now you stay stuck within that complex. See, I'm rare. Women ain't like me no more. They ain't no niggas like me no more. I'm the last of a dying breed. I'm a cut from a different cloth. Really think about the aspect of saying you the last of a dying breed. A breed is a sub creation of the original seed. Greetings. Greetings. Welcome in, everybody. Welcome. But when you're sitting in that space with yourself, think about saying you the last of a dying breed. A breed is a sub creation of the creation, the original identity or creation. So every time that I say this, in that context of not understanding what it is, Because I'm not ready to own that I am that original breed. I am that original aspect of myself. I am that standard. I'm not ready. I'm not ready to really sit inside of that space because of the responsibility it comes with. And now what I always say, where you're not willing, you'll create a responsibility. We're going to get into that next. Put that point right here. When you sitting inside of that space, I'm not the last of a dying breed. I am the breed. I am a hybrid at this point. I can't be a part of the old breed. I understand that I'm aspects of the old breeds, but now I'm a hybrid. I'm on some underworld shit. I am a hybrid because I've taken all parts, weaknesses and strengths from all aspects of myself, and I've sat with them and I work on them and I build on those. So I'm not doing things to for something. I'm doing things because they're naturally of what I am. Now let's pull this point out. This is where we get into the aspects of will. Where I'm not willing, I will always create a responsibility. Where I'm not willing to understand something, or I'm not willing to go through the process of acquiring the new experience, there will always be a responsibility that needs to be met. The responsibility, i.e. the falsehood. The responsibility, i.e. the falsehood. I can actually make this go away since I can show my whole face since I got it over here. Now I'm stuck within the aspects of that. A lot of times when we look at the aspects of grooming, now let's break down in grooming. We just talked about the two extremes. You got punishment, reward, stimulation, substance. You got punishment, reward. You got consequence, responsibility. You got consequence and accountability. You have stimulation versus substance. Stimulation is constantly seeking something to bring something to you inside of your space because of what you feel that you deserve based on the targeted information that you gathered. I've been through so much, that means I deserve to have a couple of good days. What have you done to create those good days? What have you done to create that in your space? What are you actively doing? You can tell when you're seeking stimulation in the aspects. This is when we get into codependency. You can tell you look for stimulation because the moment that you get it, you don't know what to do with it once you have it. Everything that you said you were going to do, since you have not assessed your roots to why you keep falling out of balance anyway, you're going to do the same thing anyway. You're just going to change it around. Okay, this year I'm not going to go out and party at all. I'm not going to go out and drink. I'm not going to go out and party. I'm not going to do none of this stuff. I'm not going to wild out this year. But until you understand why you was doing it in the first place, all you're going to do is regroom the space. All you're going to do is recondition the space. And eventually it's going to lead back to that same point. Everything, you're going to lead right back, same point. You can't get away from it and not... You must let the information actually sit to go further than it. You can't keep rationalizing it. I don't understand, like, I gotta stop trying to rationalize I gotta stop trying to rationalize why I feel this way. And I've talked about that. That video is on my YouTube channel. I talked about accepting the aspect of the fall. I gotta go outside of the space of myself where I'm constantly in need for somebody to fill my things to that void. Exactly. I love that example. Using aspects of electricity. If you're not willing to understand how to channel that shit, it's literally how to channel and use your energy, you're going to pay somebody else every single time. But there's not now let's get into this aspect. Because that grooming strategy, this is another that perfect example, because this goes into that grooming strategy of that aspect of where a lot of times, because of our traumas and not having anybody to depend on and being left alone and being hurt, you're always in that state that nobody understands you. And then you have people that come into their awakeness or your consciousness. Now you awake and you conscious, and now you out here, you still you only have understanding based on where you came from. So you only can use based on where you came from. So if you felt alone back then and you were trying to search for something in the now, you're going to do the same thing in the now because you're still stuck within that codependency narrative. Now, this goes into the aspects. I wrote down these notes the other day. Let's go to the notes. When we go into the aspects of, as I go over here, oops, wrong, there we go. It's that one. We go into the aspects of really loving yourself. The aspects of loving yourself. Understanding that every relationship in raising yourself up, learning yourself, cultivating that new space, learning how to channel yourself, channel your energy and work with your energy, you got to understand what level of class that you're in. If you're still dealing with a lot of your traumas on the lower end of that aspect, you're very susceptible to codependency narratives. You're very susceptible to the atmosphere. And a lot of times you get stuck because I came from an atmosphere where I didn't have much and I didn't get what I needed. I didn't get what's necessary. So I'm automatically going to stay in that atmosphere. But staying in that codependent atmosphere, that's when the relationship becomes, oh my God, shorty taught me everything. She taught me a bunch of shit. She taught me how to shave. She basically Tarzaned my ass and taught me how to stand up straight and all of this shit. Or you with the nigga that literally fucking, what's that nigga name? Fucking Charles Manson your ass. So you were in the aspect of that Charles Manson. You were stuck within that aspect, that grooming, that coercing. But a lot of the grooming and coercing, you didn't know where you got it from. Where you learned a lot of your narratives that you rationalized. You rationalized behind them being sick. So I'm going to give you something to think about. You was at your uncle's house. You was at your auntie house. And auntie, uncle said, let's look at these pictures. And it's okay. And they were doing what they were doing for those years. Your mother either said you were lying and your mother said you were lying, but then in the background of that, she was over there saying, he's sick. He's sick. I can't believe it. This is sick. This is sick. This is sick. All you hear is sick, sick, sick. So your mother, now in order to validate your mother, my mother could have done more, but you'll validate it by trying to get her attention by every time you hear the word, now you're triggered by sick. You're triggered by sick or under the weather or something's not healthy. So now you are in your current space. Ooh, I'm going to go on a fast. Okay, cool. You about to go on a fast. You about to go drink water for 30 days. Cool beans. Join the team. Or you become plant-based. Everything you're going to be doing is going to be based on the extreme. You are going to do it to the extreme. You're going to go, I'm plant-based all day. I'm going to do this to the extreme. Because inside of your mind, when your mom says, are you sick? How are you feeling? You're saying that you now feel that you're now better. Because you're thinking in that sense is that if I recondition the space to eat healthier, then the event that happened at my uncle and aunt's barbecue never existed. I can remove it. I can wipe it from the slate. But since I was now I'm not addressing the original codependency. I'm not addressing the original codependency narrative. I'm not addressing the emotional cadences that I was inside of that space. So now everything that I do now becomes the other extreme. So now everything that I'm only targeting other vegans. Now I'm only targeting other people that are stuck within in a certain complex to validate that I'm better, to validate that I'm not sick. I don't want to be sick anymore. I guess I was sick because I'm not looking at my value system. I guess I was sick. I guess I was hurting. So now I stay in that process. I just further groom myself. When we're really thinking about the aspects of this, your grooming and how much you really groom yourself, it goes in the aspects of you didn't watch 962 different fucking lectures. You didn't pay $3,000-$4,000 for classes when nigga Lucifer charged $150 for a class. Didn't need here nor there. Just wanted to be funny. And you did all of that based on the aspect of the reason that old buddy or old girl could get you like that for 2 G's, however much money, the reason that they could get you is because they were the mother you didn't have. They gave attention to the inner child that you haven't been dealing with. They came to you and they made you feel all warm and like attention. They gave you the attention. They said it wasn't your fault. The things that you've been telling yourself. They're only implementing what you've been telling yourself. It's not your fault. People are sick. It's not your fault. People are bad. It's not your fault. People don't have an understanding of themselves. Hurt people hurt people. And you listen to all of that. So they gather your information through that. Yeah, oh my God, you're saying that. Oh my God, yeah, yeah, because of this, and this. And then you outpour and you emotionally dump into the space because you're not used to being heard because you don't listen to yourself. So naturally you groom a space to where if somebody hears me and listens to me, I can take away I don't have to take any responsibility inside of this space. But the moment that I lose something in that space, that's the punishment. Remember, the punishment becomes passive. If I'm always seeking the punishment, if I'm always seeking the negative that doesn't serve me, if I'm always seeking the positive that doesn't serve me. Yeah. Don't let your trauma, remember your ego automatically wants you to try. It's like, I'm going to fix it right now. I'm talking about, I'm going to fix this right now. No, you're supposed to understand it. I can't fix, if you sat here right now, if the day my pops called me Lucifer for the first time and I tried to go back and fix that, if I tried to go back and fix that, I'd be the ultimate preacher. I can see it happening. I would be the ultimate preacher. If I came into my consciousness, I came down the line any way to do that, I'd be the ultimate salesman of trinkets and herbs and hey, it ain't your fault, brother. It's the devil. Instead of saying the devil, I'm going to say it's the white man. Because I was groomed that way. But since I was able to sit inside of that space and go back to it, everything from my pops being a Mason, he was a worshipful master as a Mason. He had me around Masons. Nigga, that shit was a benefit to me. I remember being in high school, wilding out. It was my last year of high school down here before I had to go up top to go finish school. I remember sitting down there, like, yeah. I remember sitting there. The damn lawyer was a fucking Mason. I'm sitting there like, my case was supposed to be at least $4,000. My shit was like $1,000. Like, so it was a benefit. It was a benefit to the space. But if I was staying within the aspects of the grooming, that reward, and not understanding like, yo, I was wilding out. And go back, if I was not able to go back to that point, a lot of the things that I did wouldn't have made sense in the current state. See, your trauma, your ego said, we can fix it. All we gotta do is replace this woman for that woman, or replace that man for that man, that place for this, get this job, even get into this, and this, and we fix it. We ain't got to deal with it anymore. Now everybody goes from, now in order to validate where you're at, you're constantly invalidating them. They're sick. They don't want to deal with themselves. When it gets really, really deep, some of the people that are inside of your life are just NPCs. They're non-playable characters that only last to they're non-playable characters. That's all that they really were. When you really start, if I really sit here and give you the aspect of, you're going to get to a point where you have to see your mom as her name. I insert her name. My mom, or you would say Daphne, based on what she had been through and how she did not like what she received as a mother, she became the identity of the mother that was never going to allow that to happen to her kids. So everything that she did was as the identity that she was trying to maintain. So she groomed me based on to keep that identity based on the extremes of the punishment and the rewards. That means emotional development or lack thereof. Too much emotional development to an excessive nature naturally becomes, anything that goes to an excessive nature is the abuse, is the trauma. A lot of time, my mom gave me everything that I wanted when I was younger. Congratulations, you went through physical abuse. Congratulations, you went through emotional abuse. Because if your mother did not sit you down and explain it to you, or did not know how to explain that, instead of explaining or sitting with you to help you understand your emotions, she said, here's this candy, here's this ball every time that you cried, and then diverted it consciously. Right, this is where we go into covert and overt. Covertly, based on what she went through, and then she was like, it's not your fault. It's because your dad didn't show up. But I'm going to get you this. We're going to go over here. Now you are being groomed again. So now your entire trauma narrative has been, now the narrative of your trauma has been skewed, now it's been augmented. Now you got a whole new psychosis. Your mother acknowledged or was sitting in the masculine seat. Oh, yes. That flaming hot Mountain Dew. I don't know why. Flaming hot. Yeah, that's commercial. Yeah. That is some super abusive shit. But think about that with two extremes. You got flaming hot Mountain Dew, flaming hot Cheeto Mountain Dew, and on the other end, you got zebra cake donuts. Everything keeps you in the side of aspects of extreme. So if we're always stuck in this aspect of thinking based on the extreme, that means this has that. If this is when you get stuck in that mindset. This happened, so this can happen. But if none of these things happen, then this won't happen. This getting stuck. You're grooming yourself. Think about the grooming narrative of you sitting there and you said by 25 you're gonna have X amount of kids. I'm gonna have all my kids early. By the age of 25, I want to have all my kids early. But you didn't say that back at 25. I can guarantee for most people to not say that shit at 25. You didn't say it at 25. You waited until you were in your 30s and you saw somebody just now having their children. And you were like, see, I had my kids when I was early. I got them out. I got them out the way. I got them all out the way before I was 17, but I got them all out the way before I was 25. So now you're trying to rationalize and validate about the first child that you had. The first child is like you were sitting there with a boy and he made you feel insecure. You were sitting in the back of his box Chevy and then he got you pregnant and disappeared. The first child that you had with a woman, you were forced into an extended period of time to take care of this child. Because that's when you get aspects of that, being stuck within that cycle. Exactly. You writing footnotes. Let me read this real quick. All right. So jealous family members all the time. Just because my brothers and I had everything doesn't mean shit is all sweet. Just because we were spoiled doesn't mean no shit was made of trauma hard. Because we thought we was perfect. Yeah, exactly. That's when we really sit with that space. Like when you're really sitting there and the outside looking in and that image that has been projected for so long, that perception created that body. That perception created that target space. You had everything, and then now you go into that older state and you're like, you had everything when you're growing up. You didn't have to want for anything. But in reality, you're sitting there, you're like, but when you cried, I didn't listen. I told you, like, now how many times you sitting there inside of your space and you're like, this when I'm dealing with, like, because I'm dealing with the older, everybody in that space. When I sit there and tell one of my clients and I'm like, you have to remember the emotional traumas that you went through. The traumatic events that you have suppressed, the unresolved that you have created. That was your mental, emotional, or physical. your mental. You took those aspects and you manifested those emotionals. You manifested that mental into emotional. You transferred that emotional into physical. When we don't really think about how we create that space, this is how we create that space. Everything has to come from somewhere. So if I'm sitting inside my space and now I'm looking at, like, using an example, your daughter that came into Instagram, your child that came into Instagram and taking pictures and selfies and shit. And the first thing that you want to do is you're going to yell like your mother did. Where the fuck did you learn that from? Looking at you. She looked at you and every nigga that you had coming around in the house. She looked at every dude you had come in and give you some attention. And she saw you always getting attention. You had her over at your sister's house, your friend's house, and saw the dudes giving it. So she thought that's what it was. And now every time she heard you saying that, she heard the dudes giving you what you did because you kept talking about the baby, that child's father wasn't shit. But that goes back to your shit of your mother. It's you seeing your mother and your father arguing, and you're trying to validate that. So you're trying to maintain that space, that emotional point. You're trying to keep that space the same. So now inside of your space, through your wounded perspective, your perception, you project the perceptions onto your kids. You perceive the perception or your targets. You're creating targets. So now everybody's a target. That guy right there, that chick right there does this, and this. Because you're only looking at surface level aspects. See, you haven't dated yourself yet. This is what I was talking about. You haven't done any courting of the sort. You haven't done any dating of yourself of the sort. Every time you get to a certain stage, then you kick out of it. Because you didn't set the intention in the courting. So when we talk about setting these intentions, it's not based on stimulation. See, that grooming narrative, it has you stuck on stimulation. It has you looking for that hit, looking for that fix. This can fix all of this. Once I get this, I'm good. I ain't got. Think about how you say it to yourself. You'll run yourself ragged the same way your mother ran herself ragged, trying to maintain an identity. The same way your dad tried to keep her maintain an identity. Uncle, father figure inside of your life. You're trying to maintain the same identities and narratives through the same grooming points. We can go all the way back and talk about the aspects of, man, but it came from the aspects of the slavery and the slave master was the first groomer. No, slave master wasn't the first groomer. Slave master wasn't the first groomer. You got to realize, this is what I always talk about, who the fuck you really are and what line you on. Some of you are not gods and goddesses, kings, queens. Some of you are not at that space. That wasn't your trip. You're not that god, that goddess, that king, that queen. You're not in that space yet. Nope. Some of you actually came down in the aspect of you're still a slave. You were a slave to your emotions in the past life. You allowed your emotions to overtake you in the past life. So you came back here as a slave. So you're in that, now you're still stuck in that slave mentality. So now in the reality, this is why I break down this is why I was talking about mankind, humanity, then the aspects of the Godhead, that God sphere. Some of you are still stuck in your mankind or your behaviors and patterns because you're not ready to deal with your behaviors and patterns. So you only can get things based on that space. But because of the grooming and conditioning of you can get whatever you would like, everything is giving you based on the aspect of you feel like you're deserving of it, but you're not really deserving. You're in the aspect of entitlement. We went through 400 years. We deserve this. What have you done personally to build that aspect with yourself? What if you really go back and go look at your genealogy report and ain't not one slave on there? Your family owned the slaves. What if you went to go look back at that and you found out that you own the slaves? You are your family were the ones that commissioned slave ships. What if you go back and look at that shit? See, this is when you shattering your old identity. Because your identity, you built an identity on being a slave. It's kind of like if you watch the old Ten Commandments movie, you built your whole identity on being a slave, on being what this is here. But that never was you yet. It was available to you. It worked for you, but you got to look at what you had to do to maintain that. What you had to do to maintain that space. This is what we're looking at, the aspects of your story, your imprint, and your story. Until you go through that state of forgiveness with yourself about that, your first child, the first child that you had. Let's go even deeper. The first time, let's use the aspects of coercion. You were coerced. The first time that you had sex was it a coerced moment? How did you learn sex? How did you learn how to have sex? What was your first experience with it? Because until you dealt with that, until you've forgiven them, until you thank them for what they taught you, even though through the channel that it came through, you're going to keep repeating that. And you just kept building on top of that. You automatically think that's why you got everybody that does a fucking video on, you got to take a chick out. You take a chick out, you get her some food, and you're going to be able to knock that shit off. And because that exists, that exists. That's why you have chicks on the other end of that spectrum, the extreme punishment so this break it down like this. On the man aspect, targeting women to targeting women in the aspects of conquering women by giving them something to stay within their aspect of the reward. So their middle point is a woman that would nurture that and help them be able to evolve past that. On the other end of the extreme is the punishment or the consequence. That would be the woman. That would be the woman on the other end that will eat you out of house and home because that's all she's ever known. So let's look at the other end of that spectrum. Now you got the woman on the other end. They're the reward, and the nigga not giving it to them to avoid the punishment of really sitting with themselves. They got to keep grooming that space. But how do you keep that space groomed? Remember, you cannot fix a problem on the level that it's at. You cannot fix anything on the level that it's at. You must go above it, or you must either rise through it, or you must look down at it and understand it and study it. That's why you'll always have that person will project that projection into their fear. Because that's guaranteed. That's guaranteed. That's guaranteed just like their real mom, just like their mother. That's guaranteed just like their aunt. That's guaranteed just like that's guaranteed just like the space that they learned it from. So this gets into the aspect of like, why the bad boy like the good girl and why the good girl like the bad boy and shit of that nature. And then motherfuckers be like, you don't wait until you're damn near in your 30s when you didn't have all the damn kids and now you want to come back for me because now I'm a good guy. The only reason that you still there still available is because you haven't. The only reason that you're still there available to that is because you being a good guy and you said being put last, that was your extreme punishment was to get somebody else. The extreme punishment of being a good guy is taking care of some other nigga kids. You wrote that story out. You wrote those lines out line by line. You wrote that story out that somebody's gonna see value in you. And then every time you got with a guy, I was head over heels over that nigga. Then you had this nigga kid, but now you hate your baby father. Because you keep grooming, you have to keep the space conditioned so you don't have to deal with it. How you learned how to have sex. How you learned how to conquer, divide. So nothing you can do is going to be in the aspects of multiplying. It gets even deeper whenever you've been conditioned through the aspects of pain. Now you've been conditioned that everybody said your life was the shit at a certain point in time. So now you going out looking for the negative. If I can change their perception of me and they really accept me, then I can say bump my fucking family. So now you jumping out there targeting. You target the nigga that can make you feel independent. Now I can stay independent. Yeah, man, I don't need a nigga for anything. Okay, cool. I don't need no bitch for anything. All right, bet. Cause you still looking for the provisions. I can cook, I can clean. Nigga, every time you cook, you got resentment. Every meal that you cook at your house is full of resentment. Every fucking meal you cook is full of resentment. Shorty, every outfit and every time you go out and every blunt you roll up is full of fucking resentment. So yes, you can feed yourself resentment. Yes, you can feed yourself resentment. Yes, you're good at feeding yourself resentment. You are great and grown at feeding yourself the falsehood of that you got to do it by yourself. Yes, you are great at that. Congratulations. You have successfully reconditioned yourself and stayed in that state of grooming with yourself because you're not really doing anything. You're not raising anything. Nothing in your space raises. And anything inside of your space that raises, you automatically want to take credit for because that's a sense of ownership. That grooming complex, staying stuck in the grooming, staying stuck in targeting, abusing, emotional dumping, gathering information, isolation, that control narrative. So now you can sit there and be like, because it was because of me that you were able to do that, with or without me. And this is when you're stuck in that. This is codependency now becomes the interdependence. Codependency now becomes the interdependence. Because that interdependence, that's tone versus tone. See, we just finished that whole, everything we just talked about was atmosphere versus atmosphere and codependency. Atmosphere and atmosphere, codependency. I came from a chaotic environment. You came from a chaotic environment. If we come together through the chaos, that means we run away together. If we run away together into this chaotic space, it'll help us devolve our individual tones. The things that happen to us. So now inside of this space, everything is based upon what we do as a collective. But in order for us to keep doing what we're doing as a collective, all of my projections got to stay in play. All of your projections got to stay in play. Now we're codependent upon each other. Then you come into the state of, once you really realize you started shedding, this is after you went through the 9th relationship and you know that nigga ain't shit. And now you're no longer saying the nigga ain't shit. That motherfucker taught me one thing about myself, that I am excessively stuck. I'm stuck in a pattern. It sounds simple to say that out loud, but you're not saying it from an aspect of a victim mentality. There's no more but at the end of it. See, a lot of times we get stuck on that but and that for. That nigga did this, and that, but that nigga did this, and that, but if he did this, and this would have been good. It wouldn't have been, if this wouldn't have happened, that wouldn't have happened if it wasn't because of me. If that's true. And this is true. This is how we break that point of that narrative. If that was true, why are you still in the same position? And you'll give yourself the bullshit excuse because I help people. I don't want people to look at me. Now the truth start coming out. I don't want people to look at me a certain type of way. People already think that I'm stuck up. No, that's not what it is. You have a fear of rejection. You have an insecurity and you feel that you are inadequate at any other level. Hello, I'm Lucifer. I'm not your traditional therapist. Let's get to the real aspect at hand and what it really is. So now you go into the state of interdependence. This is the mirroring relationships. This is the twin flames. This is the karmic flame. These are them karmic cycle relationships where it's a lot of interdependence. That means there's a lot of building based on what you have. See, that codependent relationship is building heavily based on survival and lack. You had a car, I had a house, so we got together. And so now you had a kid, I had no dad, I'm gonna go be a daddy. Oh, you got a son and I ain't never had a mother, I'll be your child's mother. Codependency. Interdependence. That's when we get into the aspects of you've been living in your trauma long enough that you built a world that is dominated by the aspects of you avoiding your trauma. So you groomed a space that was based upon you avoiding your trauma. That means you got a crib. It's not yours. It wasn't yours when you were codependent. You have a crib. You have bills. When we say now you're an adult. You have all of these bills, but you do not understand what a damn budget is. Why? Because your codependency taught you that you didn't have to worry about the budget. You just had to show up. So now that you're interdependent, now that you showed up a couple times and you got a couple of things, see how you become interdependent? As long as that job is good, you're okay. As long as you can catch flights and not feelings, you alright. As long as you can escape and not take no response, as long as you can pay the tab and walk away, you alright. You good. But it's interdependence. Because now you're targeting individuals that can validate where you at. Now you looking for the chick. Now you looking for now the inner child is in the codependence in this case, in this aspect. Your inner teenager, the hyper adolescent, that's all in independence, baby. That's all independence. That's you trying to be overly independent, overly you're trying to be overtly in that state of self with yourself. You're in that high level of that. You're in the high aspects of the emotional aspect with yourself, as opposed to dropping down and go back into codependency. You're now in that covert aspect. That means you're doing everything you're doing is based to set a cadence, a pattern. It's based to set the cadence when you go into a space. Let me give an example real quick. You gotta be a man. That shit shouldn't hurt. You're too emotional. These we look at narcissistic undertones, and if you were walking with us in the classes, and you're walking with us, the class is coming up not this month, but next month. You sitting inside of that space, exactly. Now I'm sitting inside of that space with myself. Think of that. All of that is based on conditioning and grooming. You've been doing it the entire time. Every time you went and told that, I told that nigga how I felt. No, you didn't. You didn't tell him anything. You didn't tell her anything. You put into the space a point of reaction, and if they reacted to it, you won. Yay. If I say you ain't man enough, and then behind that is the targeting, hit that point about their manhood, because before that, I gathered information about their childhood and related to them based on my childhood. So I gave them a false sense of security. A lot of times we do it through the traumatic experience. You didn't took that, I didn't took a chick to, I go on vacation any damn way. You can go with me. Okay. Shorty ain't never been outside of the fucking state, let alone the fucking country. Me being accepted by it, her being excited by it, I'm feeding off of her fucking fault. I've talked about this before. I fed off of the fucking wounds. Just to give myself an excuse. And this is the crazy part about the validation for me. Just to give myself the excuse of why I didn't want to go get certain jobs. Why I didn't want to go around family. So I would use that as my aspect of escape. That we out here living our best life. We out here trying to get these memories together. And I'm telling myself this because I'm keeping myself in that condition. But whenever it would go fall down, because remember the aspects of the negative. It's only based on fragmentation. That image is based on fragmentation. This is when we look at that fragmented image. I was stuck in a fragmented image of myself. As long as the job was there, as long as the job served as a relay to why I was doing what I was doing. And the reason that I had the job was because looking at my mother, and my mother was told that she was sick her entire life, and I wanted, and always put in that position. My pops had his own issues and wounds in that issue. My father was in the aspects of a cadence of trying to prove inside of that weird ass space. I kept seeing it happen inside of my life. This don't excuse the fact that shit happened. This is the fact that I'm looking at how my life played out. I'm looking at the relationships and wondering, like, why is always at a certain point in time when it's the end of a relationship, there's always another chick involved? Why does it have to be another chick involved even if it isn't there? Then I'm looking at my space and how it correlates. Now I got to look at my space and be like, wait, none of my cousins, family members knew their father. There was always another woman involved. So now, in order for me to understand this, I was groomed for this. Am I trying to be the best father ever? The only narrative that I could go from is because there was a father missing. So that's what I conditioned the space to be. Even though I was doing it unconsciously, I was doing it. So every relationship made damn sense at that point in time. And they kept repeating. Go further back, past lives. Go further back, past lives. Never off, nothing, yeah. I was the one that y'all remember that first scene on God of War when that nigga killed his wife and his kid? That was one of my past fucking lives. That happened, that was me. That was me. Past life, Nordic, in my Nordic part of my life, me being a fucking Viking. Yeah, that was me. And that shit kept replaying until I had to own that shit. See, when we look at the aspects of your conditioning is just not coming from this one point. This is what I mean by this shit is not a one and done. You've been grooming yourself with patterns and behaviors the entire time. So what comes into your space is letting you know, okay, cool, this was next on the table. You can avoid it all that you want. You can use escapism all that you want. You can falsify your emotions all you want. Falsehood of emotions all that you want. But you're only going to keep repeating the same thing because you haven't created that. This is what I was going to. You haven't created it inside of your space. Let's go into the aspects of really that courting and that raising though. The aspects of courting and raising. When I went through the first healing aspect process of really courting myself, getting to know me as me. That didn't mean that I wasn't, if there was no relationship, that I had to, if it came up, it came up. If it didn't, it didn't. But I had to understand a lot of things about my discipline with myself. See, through that grooming complex, you don't need to have no discipline to groom yourself in grooming. You just got to show up. This is why I always said the difference between doing what you want versus doing what you can. Doing what you can is going to be heavily based on stimulation. That doing what you can is based on stimulation. You got the job, you work 40, 50 hours, so you deserve to go have a drink. Anything to define why you need to go drink all the time. Anything to define why you need to go smoke all the time. Anything to define why you need to go fuck all the time. Instead of sitting with your shit, you got to go seek stimulation. As opposed to doing what you want requires substance. That's substance. What substances, i.e. narratives, i.e. emotions, am I not really dealing with? That's the courting process. That's the gathering. My intention is to learn this aspect of myself. My intention was to learn why the fuck did I feel that I needed It wasn't for me. It wasn't the space of not feeling needed. It was, I didn't know what to do if I wasn't needed. Let's use a simpler complex, and I'm going to give you a deeper one. Simpler complex. Sitting there in the kitchen with my mom, and mom's cooking, and I'm too young to do anything. Or that moment or memory, that first moment of feeling needed when my mom was teaching me. Because if you understand black mothers and black grandmothers and my grandmothers and my mothers and my aunties, my tias, they always said yours. If whatever you were cooking was yours. So here's your spoon. There's your pot. These are your ingredients. So it builds that narrative in your mind of taking ownership or pride in what you were doing. That was a positive moment of grooming. That was a positive aspect of grooming. That's that positive or the exalted aspect of being groomed inside of a narrative. Negative narrative. Sitting outside in a chick ride by, girl ride by on bike, girls walking around, and and at that point in time, I'm on punishment, so I can't leave the house. Or I was in that space where I was in a space where I couldn't leave the house because I was watching my sisters and my brothers at the house. Negative aspect of grooming. So now I developed on that sense a negative aspect of grooming. If it wasn't for my sisters and brothers, I could be doing more. So now I developed, in that same sense, I developed this that was my first line of resentment towards my mother and my pops. If my mother was here, I could be doing more. So that means in order to rationalize it, to keep this idea of my mother going, if my pops was doing more, that makes sense when my mom keeps saying, why we don't have this, this, and that. So now I'm developing a resentment to myself that I must keep myself in a position to where I always have the right provisions. Along with the grooming, the positive grooming aspect of my mother saying yours, 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 my aunt saying yours, 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 along with the negative that coincided with it, based on ownership, it developed that identity that I carried forward into the relationships that I was in. Now I'm going to be the provider. But I only can provide based on this space. The space got to be chaotic. The space got to be downwritten. The space got to be horrid in order for me to bring it up to where I'm comfortable at. So now you repeat the narrative. Now you keep doing it. You keep saying that your mother was jealous of you, and no. What does jealousy mean? She mad because I got a man and she don't. That's not jealousy. Your mom's not jealous of you. Your mom your mom feels insecure about something. Your mom is insecure. The reason that you feel that you're there, and now you feel extra insecure because you came from her insecurity. You're insecure. That's why you go so hard about why everybody hate my man. Why everybody hate the person that I'm with. Yep. Exactly. What you watching TV? You sitting there watching TV, watching how the character reacts, but you don't look at what you were doing inside of that space. So now you develop your own sequence of events. Remember, everything that's happening outside of you is based on feedback based on your consumption of where you at with yourself in reality. If I'm not knowing where I'm at in reality, what do you think I'm gonna keep doing? The same bullshit. I'm always gonna look for that reason. I'm always looking for the reason to be overly emotional or use emotional detachment. I'm always looking for the reason. I'm always looking for the punishment. I'm always looking for the consequences. I'm always looking for the fine print that's on the physical aspect. So now I got to project. If I don't see it, I got to project it there. There's something about this guy. There's something about this chick. There's something about these people that I cannot possibly be a part of that narrative anymore. They don't want to talk. They don't want to deal with it. They're stuck. So I got to do the same grooming. So now I'm grooming my kids to be the same exact way. But if I deny the positive points of where I was taught and groomed, it's behind the negative. This is why I always say the negative always come up first. Your negative, your fear, the things that, if you've never had a conversation about something in your life, the first thing that come up out of your mouth is jitteriness, anxiousness, anxiety. You feeling scared. You like, oh my fucking God, I've never said this. I've never had this conversation before. So your ego automatically kicks in because you didn't have the conversation with yourself first. Ego automatically kicks in and it looks for the pressure point. Listen for this, and this. Instead of you telling your ego, hey, yo, I'm about to tell this story. I know the emotions are about to come up. We are going to sit with these emotions. I want you to hold these emotions so we can sit with them and express them. We've done this, if we can't regulate our emotions inside of this space, what it is teaching us is that this is something that we need to work on. That's why it's a trigger. Your ego looks at it as a pressure point to push on to force you to submit to validation. See, the aspect of being an interdependence is seeking validation. You want to validate why you are where you are at. You want to keep validating it. So that interdependence is, I don't need somebody in my life to do anything for me because, okay, cool. But that person represents the body of all, that person is the body, the emotional body of all of your resentments and all of your pain. Because in that same sentence, stuck in duality, you'll sit there and be like, I shouldn't have to tell anybody something. They should just be able to see it. Because you living out the narrative from you're living out the narrative of your mother championed your brother. Your mother championed your sister. Your mother championed everybody else's kids and was worried about your image other than you. So you're still stuck in that condition to where if somebody really, you're going to, on the extreme, if somebody can see me hurting and act out and respond to this, react to this, then I can reward them. But they got to be able to get through my punishment system or my consequences. They got to get through my wall. They got to get through my wall. They got to understand my barriers. I got boundaries. You don't have boundaries. You have punishments in place. You have punishments in place. You don't have boundaries in place. You have punishments in place. So if this person doesn't give you the emotional reaction, the punishment doesn't work. Now the punishment don't work. I ain't gonna punish them. But the punishment is still there. It's still there because you ain't assessed how you create punishments instead of boundaries. So now you give them a reward. Or you feel it, or you use through your emotional void, now you try to feed that person. So now you feed them your resentment. Now, every meal that you fed them was based on resentment. Your whole fucking pussy is based on resentment. Your whole stroke game is based on resentment. Yep. I saw when you wrote that yesterday. Yeah, like, whoo. I was like, yeah, nigga, like, when you really start looking at it, like, oh, niggas. What did you think would happen, nigga, if I was not toned, if my subconscious saw this shit as real the entire time? What the fuck you thought it was? But that's where you create these realms of interdependence for yourself. You're interdependent based on the reaction of another person. So now that marriage or that bond is always based on what another person, in order to leave it, since you came in tone and tone, your individual tone and their individual tone came together and canceled out the environment. Codependency is environment and environment coming together to cancel out the identity, to cancel out the individual and create the identity. See how now the identity. I take this identity, and now that I'm in a state of interdependence, the tones cancel out the atmosphere so I can now thrive in that survival identity. I'm not going to come into partnerships, and I can't come into alignment. I'm stuck in what I'm attracting. That interdependence is when you looking at, why do I keep attracting the same fucking nigga every fucking day? Why do I keep attracting these same fucking people every fucking day? There are aspects of you that you need to deal with. Their feedback. What do you usually look for? Image. So you look at, then this is the key when we think about image. I'm going to break down image. Use the example. Woke up, stretched, woke up, meditated, stretched. I do my thing. Literally, get up. It's second nature to me in my discipline because now I'm building the day. Whether or not I'm going to go live or whether or not I'm about to do anything, I'm good. I'm going to shave. I'm going to condition my locks. I'm going to make sure I'm right. Make sure I smell good and all that good shit. Regardless of the image, regardless of it. So inside of my image that I programmed inside of my image is the intentions of, I am a counselor. I am a teacher. I am everything that I already am. It's not for anything. I'm not trying to look good for anyone. This is where you get into that grooming technique. I ain't trying to look good for anybody. What? I'm not trying to look good for anybody. They gotta accept me as me. Do you accept you as you? This is when you gotta ask the question, do you accept you as you? Because now you live in the extreme. You will look good, do everything good to a certain point until that shit dissolves. So once they get past your barrier and all of your punishments, now they get to see the real you. They don't get to see the real you. You feel like they have to accept the real you. Because you literally condition the space, cookies, candies, treats, PlayStation, Wi-Fi, car, clothes, Jordans, shoes, PS2s, 3s, 4s, 5s. You didn't condition the entire space. You got everything you want here. Why are you going to leave? If I get everything that I want inside of a space, I'm losing what I need. How am I losing what I need inside of a space based on getting everything that I want? I'm losing everything that I need. The only reason I stay inside of a space is if I feel if I do not understand the difference between my wants and my needs. My needs become the aspects of the lessons or the hardships that I needed to go through. I need the hardship. So it's not denying my need and my want. I'm getting all of this good stuff because of my hardship. So in order to keep getting this, I unconsciously must go do things that create hardship. In order for me to get it, I must live in the extremes. So on one side, you're programming the space. If I do everything for, this is where we get into the aspect of, I do everything for a nigga, they still leave. I do everything for a bitch, she still leave. Because your intentions was that. You set your intentions on somebody leaving. You saw your mom do everything that she could fucking do, and your dad still left. Deal with it. We have to deal with that. You saw your mom do nothing, and then your dad left, and now you sitting in there being the mother. Now you being the mother of the house, the woman of the house, doing everything in that space to get attention. And your mother, because she has suppressed wounds, and now inside of the space, one of her boyfriends comes in, sees you being the woman, sees you being the adult in the house, being responsible, or not being able to take care, or being too loud or unruly with yourself. That's how it streamed into the space. That's how the definition got created in the first place. That interdependence. Now you're excessively dependent, or you're excessively independent. In the center, they're the same. In order for me to be excessively independent, somebody must be dependent. That means that's where my hardship is going to lie. That means my mom can never get any better, because if she gets better, then it makes me forced to look and I ain't shit. None of them. Nothing you can keep putting is based on others. All you have at the end of the day is your accountability to what you were at inside of that space. Once I started understanding that with myself, I was like, damn, well, I couldn't I'll use a simple, lightweight example. I had my money out sitting on the couch. Had all my money out sitting on the couch. My mom came and snatched up a 20, took it out. I beat my brother's ass. Told my mom I thought my brother took my money. My mom sucked my money under the damn couch cushion. Well, the money that she left, she took $5 from the $20 that she used under the couch cushion. Said it might be on the couch. I was like, nah, I had $5. That was my first lesson in mistrust. But who initiated that mistrust? Me being unconscious, leaving my money out? What led up to that point? What led up to that point? If my mother groomed me, it was based on how she was groomed to be a certain way. It's not so much what happened to me, it's how am I dealing with it? Instead of avoiding it, instead of not dealing with it, instead of not going through the process, instead of not owning it. That's what keeps getting me stuck inside of us. That's what keeps me stuck inside of that grooming that grooming aspect. Now you got niggas out. That's why you got niggas out here right now that are in that aspect of the bitter nigga. I call it the bitter nigga club and the bitter bitch club. You bitter on both ends of the spectrum. You want to be bitter. You want to be upset. You want to be mad all the goddamn time. Because you're stuck within that you're stuck within that cycle. Then you got on the other ends of the extremes. Oh my God, our men go through so much stuff. Everything that you're going outside of yourself for or trying to do excessively all the fucking time, and you're not doing it from the aspect of my intentions of myself, is automatically going to be seen as something that somebody's going to be able to come at and show me an aspect. If my intention is still wrapped around survival and trying to save others. If my intentions are wrapped around the aspect of saving others or keeping others from going through, i.e. seeing what I've been through, or trying to be empathetic, which is the lower aspect of mirroring them, I'm using them to mirror my life. So fixing them fixes me. Savior complex. Then I need that around me all the time. Now I'm obsessed with this reflection. If they just do this, this, and this, they'll be okay. Maybe it's not, maybe they need they never had nobody like that. They never had this, they never had that. That doesn't mean that, but how do you get involved into it? See, there's always that secret ingredient that you don't want to ever talk about with yourself that gets you stuck into that space. Damn, shorty came at me and She had a fat ass. Okay, she had a fat ass. Yo, that's how, you don't even understand. Like, that's your vice. Because inside of codependency are the addictions. Inside of interdependency becomes the vices. Your addictions become your vices. That's the things that you validated and you've made okay based on certain things happening inside of your life. So now inside of my life, this is how I validate why I do what I do inside of my life. Because of my life, this is how I validate why I drink, why I smoke, why I don't give a fuck about bitches, why I don't give a fuck about niggas, why I'm a good woman, why can't I find a good person? Because you're validating the obsessive narrative that you really aren't doing the internal work. You validate yourself by everything has to be external. Well, I have this and I have this and I have this and I have this and I have this. But everything that you acquire, remember, emotional intelligence, the byproduct of emotional intelligence is financial literacy. So if I got everything that I needed, oh, God damn. Oh, God. I can't stand Johnny sometimes. So you sitting inside of that space. Everything that you got based on the emotional content, I can guarantee, let's use an example. You went to school. You went to school and you went and got the loan. You were the first one in the family to go get the student loans and all of that shit. I went to school. Guess how Carlos paid for school? Carlos paid for school because he went against what his father said. His father said don't be just like him, and he went to go be just like Pop and go in there and hit that fucking block. Ecstasy pills for sale, anyone? Cocaine for sale, anyone? So I developed an aspect through grooming based on what I already had seen. But since you now went through that independent cycle, so now you're in debt. I was in debt to that aspect of I couldn't get out of that. Everybody, to be in debt in any aspect is you must continuously be seen that way. This is when we get into the aspects of good debt and bad debt. See that good debt, the good debt is based on the ownership of yourself. I have good debt all the time. Us having this conversation, me doing this live, this is good debt. This is good debt. It's unbiased, impartial. I know where it leads to. I'm aware and open to where it will lead. Bad debt, that's when you don't know where the fuck it's going to lead. It's going to lead you to somewhere that you don't want to go. So because I acquired so much bad debt or negative debt that didn't serve me a purpose. So it served you a purpose inside of one space, but it don't serve your purpose in any other space. You haven't learned how to integrate the two. I literally had a session Saturday and I was talking about, when I go on Facebook and Instagram, I literally flood the block. Literally said that out loud to one of my clients. He was like, nigga, I like the way you put that. Cause that's where did I learn that from? Going to them club. Yep, that's where I learned it from. So I can accept it. This is one more aspect of now you're coming into that. This is when you're coming into that partnership with yourself. Now I'm partnering. I'm no longer trying to groom myself for the streets. The streets ain't existed since everything. Like I told this to my nephews the other day, when they came down. There's not been any real drugs on the streets since the fucking 80s. Me and your dad sold the last of that shit in the early 2000s. Ain't shit been real on the streets since the fucking 80s and the end of the 90s. But everything that I learned inside of that space, I was able to speak through that point of like, okay, how I market, how I speak, the things that I say, my inflections, my tones of my voice, my delivery, how I'm always inside of that space, how I can everything that I do, I have to thank that. Now I'm partnering with it. This is when you bring your shadow to the current state. Instead of me having to say, I got to go all the way back there to go be, instead of me saying I got to go all the way back there to grind and to hustle, nah, I'm in alignment. I'm in a partnership with it. I've owned all of those stories. I've owned all of those aspects of myself. I'm no longer trying to groom or condition myself or condition others to accept me. Because the reason I was back there doing that was to be accepted. The reason I was back there was to be accepted. My intention was to be accepted. That's why as soon as I got it, I didn't use it. As soon as I got, I'm in the perfect relationship. I didn't use it. I went right back. I was like, yay, my inner child gets attention. So my inner child, underdeveloped, no experience, other than the experiences, based on the level of understanding, was what go into the space. There you go. Go in there, Carlos. Now, I want you to give you a nice little visual. 11 years old, two 11-year-olds having sex. Don't know what the fuck's going on. But the conditions were just right. You got enough emotional information. But if shorty, something happened to her when she was 11, and the way that you learned sex when you was 11, those two things come together, and you hear her being, now she's emotional in the space, emotional dumping, because she has not dealt with her emotions. What you're confusing as love is the lust, or now I can sit inside of this space and I can expose myself. I have exposed myself to this person. You ain't sitting in a space of vulnerability, because sitting in a space of vulnerability, that's based on partnership. That's based on actually sitting there and you had the conversations that led to vulnerability. See, having conversations based on the grooming of exposing yourself versus having conversations that are based on leading and sitting in your own vulnerability and actually going forward with it, it's two different things. If I go into the space, my intent is to stay within my vulnerability, the conversation is different. As opposed, I'm going into this space to see if I can be vulnerable. Let me see if I can be vulnerable with this person. Why the fuck do I need to see if I'm vulnerable with that person? I haven't been vulnerable. I'm afraid of exposing myself. So what narrative stays on? That attention I got when I was in the streets? The attention I got when I was the youngest at all my jobs, the attention I get from sitting in the passenger side or sitting in the driver's seat and shorty smiling in my face. And then the only way I know my girl is really down for me is that the fact that she gonna bucket that chick. And I think that shit's cute. Or you thinking that your man jumping at some other nigga is fucking cute. He protects me. He'll fight for me. That shit ain't, that nigga, you got your issue with your mother, you watch your mother get busted upside the fucking head. And then the dude come back and tell his mother that he love her. So that became your narrative. If he's gonna fight, if he does all these things, it means he loves me. So you created a narrative. You conditioned yourself to stay within that narrative. So then, when it's time for you to level up, you gonna get that 1 in a million. You gonna get that 100. You gonna get that 1 in 999 exceptional nigga. You gonna get that 1 in 999 exceptional nigga. That exceptional bitch. That's going to drain your ass dry. That's going to drain your ass. Going to drain you. You're like, oh my God, I've never been through this type of shit before. Why? But if you come out of that shit in that victim mentality, you are doomed to repeat it. That aspect was to take you outside of your victim mentality. that anger, that anguish, that inadequacy, that pain that you went through inside of that space was the sum of all of the shit that you weren't dealing with. When I say that your emotions do not come from the space that you are at, it is based on the buildup. So if every time that I'm going into space, I'm wild and I'm free, and I'm not taking care of my shit, you think that shit just gonna not happen? You think that shit ain't, you think you not gonna see that shit? This is coming to see you. Hello, I'm your shadow. Hello, we the shit you ain't been dealing with. Hello, this is the way to, oh, now you want to stop? This is when we get into the aspects of the demons. Oh, now you want to stop having fun over here? Nah, we still want to keep playing. We still need to get fed. You ain't strong enough. You ain't strong enough without us. It reflects inside of your space. That nigga that you keep trying to change, the woman that you keep trying to change, you keep fucking all your help because you're afraid to go to the next level with yourself. That ex that you still have problems with, that relationship that, even though you left that relationship 7 relationships ago, all 7 relationships were aspects of the points that you didn't leave out of that relationship because you ain't forgive the first relationship you ever had, which was with your mother, which was your father. You haven't forgiven the first sexual relationship that you had. You have not sat with that and dealt with that first sexual relationship. So everything that happens in every other relationship, you can apologize. That's why you sitting there with yourself. I don't be forgiving these niggas because these niggas know what they be doing when they be doing it. I don't be forgiving these bitches. They know what they doing when they be doing it. You sound fucking stupid. That's going to be honest with you. You sound conditioned. I can't be angry at anybody. Can't be upset. I can't hate anybody. Because on one level of it, I'm like, oh, they got some shit they got to deal with. On another level, it's like, oh, they don't want to deal with that shit. And on another level, it's like, what is this showing me about me? See, I'm always going to inflect. I'm always going to look at myself with it. I'm not going to be looking at like, these niggas should have done something like, nah. Mm-mm. If they just did this, why didn't you do it? Because I didn't have the resources. I didn't have the money. They got the money. I need a nigga with money. There's a difference between, here goes the differences in boiling down into partnership. Partnership is about the aspect of aspiring the resources. In a partnership, I'm looking at the resources. I'm learning how to administer and use different resources. I'm comfortable because through shedding the identities of my codependencies, I came into a state of interdependence, which is now my new learning space. So now in the partnerships, I'm learning that the resources that I'm getting are valid, are now confirming where I'm at with my own partnership with myself. As opposed to, on the other end of that, through my grooming, and I grabbed a code, I learned never to trust another nigga. I learned to never trust another bitch. So in my interdependence, every nigga around me they can't do nothing for me but give me that stroke, or she can't give me nothing but fucking pussy. That's all I want. So my partnerships are going to be based on validating my need for those things. That's all that they're good for. Because I'm going to avoid my codependency on that's all that I can provide. Because I have not learned to provide deeper to myself. I don't know the difference between providing and provision. So I got to keep the conditions the same. I got to keep looking at stuff the same. Got to keep reacting off the same. I got to stay here and not come here. I cannot come directly to the heart. Because if I go directly to the heart, it exposes where my hurt is at. So I only can go through the head or through the root. I only can go through the crown or through the root chakra. Mm-hmm. What if you accepted it all today with yourself? What if you said it like, you know what? Let me accept my. Let me do What if you start doing what you're supposed to do today? It really started. If you really sat here and start doing your work, the thing that stops a lot of people from doing their work is the imagery that you are going to lose. That root, what you're grounded in, and what you made your crowning achievements. What you're rooted in and what you made your crowning achievements. So if you made your pussy or your dick your most crowning achievement, then you're always going to try to be crowned by, you're always going to be crowned by the animalistic shit. This is talking about that. When I talked about that alpha wave, you can't go above the alpha wave. That's why you stuck in the alpha mindset. Activity. Just moving around and just doing shit. Acting. Literally, just overactive. Hyper-adolescent. So the highest thing for you is how you know. Ask you a question. Here's a common grooming question. How do you know that your shit's good? How do you know your shit is A1? If everything that you say is because somebody did something in negative transit, bust my windows, kidnap me, fight my baby mother, fight this person, do this and that, no. Your shit is garbage. Your shit's garbage. You mean not one? That means you ain't birthed not one professor outside of your vagina. You ain't christened not one chick to open up to start her own company and business. You ain't christened and you ain't birthed. So what is your shit made of? Validating that, and then you validate it by the lines that you use based on conditioning. Crazy bitches got the best pussy. That's like if you never had a chick that was all plant-based, and you had a bitch that ate fried chicken all the goddamn time, and the first time you had that bitch that tastes like fucking true, that actually takes care of her body, you don't know how to react to it. Because your conditions weren't that. Certain individuals at certain points bring certain things out of you based on where you are at. If you are stuck within the codependent realm, then you must break the grooming of all codependencies inside of your space. That means learning your behaviors and your patterns. When you come into the state of interdependence, that means you are looking at all of the events in you're looking at all of the events and the people of these events in the aspects of understanding and assessing your network. So when you come into the partnership, now you're in the resource of the idea. You've been building based on the resource of the idea. You've been building the resource, you've been using your resources and learning of your healing of the idea. I now have a new custom idea of what it is to be the divine masculine. I now sit within my divine masculine, my divine feminine sense in balance. I understand that the resources that are coming to me are now the feedback of me understanding and developing and raising this partnership. Because the next level for me is going to come into that aspect of what I'm aligning with. I understand that my interdependence was based upon what I was attracting. And my codependency was based on what I was allowing. I'm no longer allowing certain things, so I'm no longer attracting certain things, so I naturally come into alignment. But if I'm not dealing with what I'm allowing, then I can't deal with what the fuck I'm attracting. Then I'm not going to take accountability for the partnerships. I'm going to keep the same conditions. I'm going to do the same shit. I'm going to keep the same arguments over and over and over and over and over again. Y'all don't understand how. If you're familiar with me and when I'm doing classes and lectures, y'all know that when I'm in there, nigga, I'm just sweating. I've told it before. I know what Bobby Hemmett meant by when he was sweating. He was instantly detoxing all the damn time because his body was on that high energy level. But yeah, now we're gonna open up the floor. I should have put this in other groups. I haven't done it in the mini groups before in a long time. Go away. As I said before, we are doing questions, answers. This is a question and answer. I'm also doing the reading. What the fuck? Did I do what I wanted to do? Yeah. No. Do. Boom. 1 second. That felt great. And like that, we had to pee. All right, we back. All right. As I said before, I am doing readings. Y'all know how I do a collective. I like how that shit did that there. If you have any questions, you throw them in the comments. I'm gonna read through some questions while I sit here and shuffle a duffel of cards and pull out a couple of cards and talk about some energy. Let's talk about energy. But yeah. And while I'm doing that, I'm gonna continue to keep flowing, just keep going in that space. Understanding yourself in that narrative of how you groomed yourself. How you stay in this space of I always ask the question, are you relearning or are you reconditioning? See, the reconditioning process, you have to stay in a state of, due to my conditions or my punishments, the things that punished me, I deserve these rewards. My rewards are always I was always actively seeking for the reward. Somebody that's always targeting or has a target for things or is in that aspect of conditioning, they're always in a state with themselves where they're always actively looking to punish. They're always looking to actively punish. Even to the aspects of themselves. Think about how many times you sat with yourself and when you didn't get something the way that you wanted it to be, you would punish yourself by repeating what led you to that point. How many times have you done that? You're actively seeking the punishment because you're stuck in that state of that grooming. As opposed to you actively saying, wait, this keeps coming up and I have to really sit and deal with this. I don't know how to sit and deal with this. This when we go into the biggest aspect of grooming. The biggest grooming feature is I'm not black niggas and women, black people don't go to therapy. Got to get rid of that old narrative. You got to challenge that old narrative. That old narrative has to be challenged. Can't keep doing the same thing over and over and over again. Because the fuck do you mean? Let me read this. How do you engage? I love this question. How do you engage with a person that has both mother and father childhood trauma? I am part of the type of trauma. The first thing that I tell people is the first thing that you have to identify with, because you can't identify with the person. You never can identify with the person. You can't identify with the person. You can't engage with the person until you identify with yourself. So the first question that I would ask you is, inside of that space, first question I would ask you is, in what ways, if you are triggered, if something comes up or the things that are being said to you How do you feel, simply with that question right there, how do you feel about every time that you are every woman in my life? How do you feel about that? What about the women inside of your life? Because everybody's giving you an answer. How are you with the women inside of your life, your own personal life, your mother, your aunties, uncles, your family members in your life? The fuck? All right, we're going to ignore that. So the next question would be the issue, like, what are one, in order to actually sit with it, like, what is something that you guys, what is something in that space of one of your traumatic experiences that you have not sat with long enough? What is something that he has said it based on? Every time he gets to that point of like, let's use aspects of your mother. In that space, every time y'all go at it, he said you just like every other woman in my life. How does that reflect you based onto your mother? Because usually when people actually say that aspect, it's for the lack of the mother figure in their life or the way that their mother treated them. So what triggers in you is naturally going to be that aspect of how your mother treated you or didn't treat you. So basically, your engagement with that aspect is first acknowledging, thanking him. Thank you for bringing this up. You've given me something to really think about. You've given me something really to think about. Acknowledging the space. You've given me something to think about. Let's go. If you want to, this is how, because somebody with a mother wound, it's a lack of nurturing. It's a lack of not feeling protected. So you sitting in that space as this learning back and forth with you guys. For you, him triggering you in that goes into, and you are every woman, that usually triggers imagery. So the imagery from your mother, the imagery that your mother provided is what that's how you're going to start it. That's how you're engaging. First engagement is de-escalation. What led to that point? What things did you say that led to that point? What conversations were being had? What things are you saying? Are you looking at what you're saying? Because a lot of times through a traumatic experience, we can say things and mean them one way in our mind, but they come out the other way because of the trauma. So it's like looking at what you're really saying. Hey, give me an example. Something as simple as, hey, give me an example. What's an example of me being like every other woman in your life? Allow them to have that space to get that example. Whatever they say, remember, you're going back and assessing yourself like, damn, but because a lot of things we saying in that emotional aspect, use an example. If we're having a conversation about money issues, we're having a conversation about money, finances. You ain't taking care of this, and this. You ain't no man. How many times do you think this motherfucker is triggered? Remember, the emotion doesn't come from the current space. It comes from the space where he heard that the first time. So his response is going to be a response that he's been wanting to say ever since then. That's why I become so, you just like all the other women. You don't understand something. I need some shit. Here's the positive aspects of that conversation. Hey, I want to sit down and let's talk about this. Let's talk about this with the money. Because when we got together, you said you had this, you were wanting to do these things, and you said you were doing this, and this, but slowly a lot of these things fell away, and you got distant, and now I acknowledge that I picked up on it, but for me, my apologies to you for not setting a proper boundary of I'm doing this based on, I was doing this based on you not leaving me because of a traumatic event, as an example. You not leaving me like my mom left my dad left my mom. Acknowledging that to yourself. So I'm using, the same way that you feel this, the reason I'm feeling used in this situation is because I'm using the situation from my past. So now when you're sitting inside of that space, the conversation changes. Now remember, you can't force somebody to change. You can't force somebody to take in the information. All you can do inside of this space is acknowledge your traumas. Because that's what that space is a space of feedback. It's going to help you acknowledge the shit that you haven't been doing, the things that you've been avoiding the entire time. It's not up to them to fix it. Because once you start addressing the traumatic issues with yourself, then you really, now when you start taking that assessment, you'll be like, yeah, a lot of our shit was based on the physical. A lot of our shit was based on what you were able to do in the beginning. A lot of the shit was based on this narrative that I conditioned myself with. I really don't know how to have a conversation with you because I don't know how to have a conversation with myself. It's being honest and validating and apologizing and then now setting tones from that space. Hey, since we're at this space, maybe because this becomes the truer reason, the only reason that you come to therapy, the only reason that you go seek outside help is to either validate or fix. But in order to fix something, both, like especially when I'm talking to clients, I only can come from that one angle of that aspect. So it's aspect of acknowledging the aspects with yourself. That's the only way that you're actually going to be able to engage. The only way you can engage is first engaging with yourself. When he triggers those things in the aspect, how do you deal with them? How do you have the conversation? Or does it become overly emotional? Everybody wants to yell. There's a lot of shutdown, and then followed by, after y'all then shut down and separated for a little bit, y'all come bearing gifts. Y'all have sex, you don't talk about it again, or you don't have sex and now you're even more mad. How do you keep cultivating inside of that space? If somebody has these issues, the first thing that you're going to realize is it's based off of my issues. I'm trying to base engaging with this person based off of my issues, how I've dealt with my issues. I can't use the way that I've dealt with, the way that I'm coinciding with my traumas and help this person in that same way. Because all I'll be doing is that's literally the basis of grooming. Because all you're going to be doing is targeting certain aspects. This is what we do in the aspect of, that's what he's using. Like from a traumatic space, him saying you just like every woman in your life. If you haven't had a conversation about it directly, about your how you came up, your upbringing, how you were raised, I'm pretty sure at a point in time he's seen it and observed it, and that's how he attached his attention to it. The only way to re-engage with a person is for you to deal with that aspect that he saw. Only way to get to that is to ask the question of, let me get an example. Let's sit down and have an example. Let's talk about this. Because I really do have a deep affection for you. I really do appreciate you at a point in time. But it's a lot of the things that we're going through now that we really, it's like we're coming to a point to where I can't avoid what I need to deal with. And I need to know if I need to know at this point, because when it comes to that point about that, it's usually the point of really setting that new tone. I know I got some things I need to deal with. And I'm actively about to start dealing with these things. I can't make you want to do it. I can't make you want to change, but I can let you, all I can do is I can let you know that I can support you But I must first support myself in this. I must give myself that support. Because a lot of times with people inside of those issues, like everybody else, it's something that they haven't dealt with that you're triggering. So now you got to look at what you do, the things that you're saying. It becomes a moment, in order to engage, it becomes a moment of really looking at yourself like, yeah, I did that. Yeah, I forgave this. I forgave that. I said I forgave this. I said I apologize for this. It's a whole entire spectrum of things. That's why I'm giving that whole entire spectrum of that answer to that. You really can't engage with somebody unless they're ready to engage into it. And until you've engaged with yours, they can't engage with you. The engagement is kind of the engagement will always be offset because you'll be trying to fix something. I'm sensing that you're trying to fix something in your relationship, kind of like you're trying to bring that harmony back, but you got a decision. You at an impasse right now. You at an impasse. You are at an impasse you're in an impasse with that aspect of that relationship. Seeing it as a certain way. You're at the end of the cycle where you've seen it, how you've seen it, and how you wanted to see it play out. You're noticing a lot of that shit ain't even on that journey. You're noticing that those paths are now separated. You notice that a lot of those paths are now separated. I don't know what this UFO is real shit is. That's making me nervous. I hope I gave you enough information to answer your question. If you are still here. Tangela Moore. I hope I said your name right. I don't like butchering people's names. Mm-hmm. 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 Yep, that is a very common point. Mm-hmm. That is a common point, especially with that. Like, you can't use. I've been like getting very deep into it's the generic aspect. Like, if you're used to being inside of a space with yourself where you're validating you, like we talked about earlier on in the class. If you're sitting in a space constantly gathering just enough information to stay within inside of your targeted space and not really dealing with the human narrative, that's what a lot of people are doing now. Like, my biggest thing, this is an overall approach. My biggest thing is I noticed that, shadow work is not shadow work. Really dealing with your shadow, really dealing with the psychological aspects, that conditioning. A lot of these programs that we don't really deal with, it's really not gone to a certain point. So that's when you'll get somebody as example, somebody that will use spirituality just the same way people are using spirituality, the same way people use Jesus. Use Allah, use whatever it is. It doesn't matter what cadence it is, they're using that to deal with their rhythm with themselves. You can't do anything for that aspect until they're going to deal with it. For you, it's going to be that aspect of like, okay, you know what? I'm ready. I'm ready to move forward. And now I got to set that new tone. Because, yeah, it's very hard. I've seen it all the time. But now you're in the opportunity. But before we do that, I appreciate it. Thank you that I was able to do that. Everything with me while I'm doing this collective reading real quick. Nice little collective. Appreciate everybody for stopping through. Before I do a collective reading, everything with me from consultations, setting up a consultation with me. I think it's above this. Let me look. Above this link, above the video. If you go all the way down to the bottom, You see book a session. You can book a session with me there. Hit me up in the inbox. Readings, give a nice disclaimer. Readings with me are confirmations and direction. Confirmation and direction. The guidance calls with me, if you do a guidance call with me, that is for challenging perspective and giving a little more clarity into that space, right? The consultation with me for shadow work, for the shadow work therapy that I provide, that is the best way for me to explain it. I said it last night, and it made sense, and I've been saying it ever since. It is an action-packed trailer of your shadows and your emotions and everything before we get into the movie that is the therapy or the coaching. Nice little disclaimer. If you are not, then I'm not for you, and I'm fine with it. Gratitude, love, peace and dark, love, and light, all that good stuff to you. But if you're ready to get deeper, inbox me, hit the link, let's set that up. But I want to do I keep pulling kings. King of Cups, this represents assessing that new aspect in that new space. We're looking at the Queen of Cups. We need to pull in tandem. What are you protecting? What are you nurturing? What is at your ear? What is it that you keep sipping on? A lot of times we like to keep sipping on the poison and keep listening to the not listening to the poison. How does it tie in? That looks at the aspects of that three of wands. What are you celebrating? What are you bringing into fruition every time you go into that space? If every time I'm saying something, what emotions am I when I'm speaking? What emotions are listening? What am I listening through? And what emotions am I listening through? Am I listening through insecurity, listening through doubt? What am I listening through? Or, because until I do that, I can't acknowledge the space that I keep creating for myself. I keep creating this false narrative of this harmony. I keep looking for this aspect to bring me peace. Or this used to bring me peace, but it really wasn't peace. It was helping me stay to keep not listening to myself. Just wanted to pull those couple. The Spirit said pull those. But yes, everything with me from readings. If there's no one answers any questions, everything from readings, consultations, all of my other services. You can hit me in the inbox, or you can hit me in that hit me at the link. I want you to understand 3 things. Healing is destructive. You are deserving, but you are not entitled. And this level of honesty is going to force you into that true state of transparency. I'm Papa Lucifer Samdi. I'm your occult therapist, your shadow shaman, spiritual life coach. Spiritual life coach. I want you to be the fucking best. I desire you to be the fucking best. Because that's what I desire of myself. That's what I want of myself. I desire that of myself. I want the best of myself. You got 1 or 2 choices. And your choice is what you want to do. What are you protecting? Like, exactly the aspect. Like, what are you protecting? What are you nurturing? What are you celebrating? I don't want to celebrate every day that I wake up, I didn't get nothing done. I want to celebrate that, yay, I'm struggling still. Yay, somebody loves me. Not before I love myself. This your first time coming through and stopping through with me? You went for a nice little treat. Sit back and relax and enjoy this ride we about to get into. We getting deeper. This has been the aspects of grooming and raising. Are you trying to stay in the conditions that so you can say that you the shit? Or are you ready to say that you are the shit? Are you ready to say that, yo, I am the hybrid. I am the new breed. Or are you still going to start, I'm cut from a different cloth? You would still want to say the same old slave adage just to keep you locked in those emotions. You got a choice. Appreciate you for stopping through. Share, hit the video. Let's be the fucking best. I love you. We love us. Ashe.